Okay, for our last Pythagorean identity proof, we're going to be looking at cosecant squared of x minus cotangent squared of x. Again, note this minus sign in the middle. This proof will not work if it's a plus. A lot of times you see things in math, and when you start to simplify these expressions, you're going to be tempted to try to say that, well, if there's a plus there, it doesn't matter. As long as it's cosecant squared and cotangent squared, it's going to be equal to 1. No, you're going to see based on the proof that this has to be a minus to work. So the sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1, but the other two Pythagorean identities require this to be a minus sign in order for them to be equal to 1. The first part of the proof is to break down cosecant squared of x into cosecant of x times cosecant of x, since that is the definition of squaring something. The same for cotangent squared of x. That's equal to cotangent of x times cotangent of x. You can see all these proofs work very similarly. Next, we're going to show that cosecant of x, the definition of cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. So we will be replacing the cosecants with hypotenuse over opposite. Same thing for cotangent. Cotangent is adjacent over opposite, and therefore we will be replacing it with its definition, a over o. Notice I was careful to bring the minus down for each step. Now we note that h over o times h over o is just h squared over o squared. So now I'm going to replace that with h squared over o squared, and the same with a over o times a over o. Now some of you might be thinking, can't you just go from here to there? Yes, you can. However, when I'm doing proofs, I like to show every single step so that students are very clear about how we get from one thing to another. If you want to skip those two steps, that's completely fine with me. So now we have h squared over o squared minus a squared over o squared. As we've done with the other proofs, this will become one fraction because they both have an o squared on the bottom. And I'll show it on this slide, but then I'm going to move to another slide since I've already done work on that one. So this is going to become h squared minus a squared over o squared, since they both have the same denominator. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So now we have h squared minus a squared over o squared. Again, these are called Pythagorean identities because we use the Pythagorean theorem. Here is our right triangle again that we've been drawing. Here's our angle x, or theta, or whatever you want to call it. The opposite side is here, the adjacent side is here, the hypotenuse is here. Question is, can we use the Pythagorean theorem to get something that looks like h squared minus a squared? Well, note that the squares of the two legs are equal to the square of the hypotenuse, so therefore a squared plus o squared equals h squared. Now what we're going to do is subtract a squared from both sides, and now we have o squared is equal to h squared minus a squared. Well, look, we have an h squared minus a squared here. So h squared minus a squared is just equal to o squared, therefore we are going to replace h squared minus a squared with o squared. Therefore this is a substitution step. So h squared minus a squared will be substituted with o squared, since that's exactly what it's equal to right here. Maybe I should use blue to be consistent with my color coding. And again, this came from the Pythagorean theorem of this right triangle. But look, now we have o squared over o squared, which is just equal to what? Again, I'm going to use the color red. That's just equal to 1. I've got the 1 down here as well. Okay, so if that's equal to 1, then we've just proven that cosecant squared of x minus cotangent squared of x is equal to 1. And that completes our proof for cosecant squared of x minus cotangent squared of x equals 1. Remember, it can't be a plus, it has to be a minus in between. In the next short little video, I'll just explain all three of them put together, but just note that sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. The other two are subtraction. If you have any other questions about this, let me know.